You might want to say today we're going to be in a brand new key, ladies and gentlemen, for good reasons. While we're not quite at a Ruby Tuesday, we'll talk to you more about, let's just say, some different things that you might want to say, well, look at what they've done to my song, man. And a man that knows exactly what I'm talking about in these references here has been a friend to our platform here over the last few months. He was the manager of, to me, when I think of all the great female singers of the 1960s and the 70s, everybody talks about Joni Mitchell. Everybody talks about Joan Baez. Everybody talks about Stevie Nicks. But then there was one from almost literally my neck of the woods in Melanie. We'll talk about Melanie and her voice and her range and the different things that she could do. And you might have said, well, did she fall by the wayside? Not so fast. We're going to talk about that because her manager here is going to talk about her catalog. And boy, her catalog is definitely vast. And we're going to talk about that, which it's being released, well, a lot of it through Cleopatra Records. And Cleopatra Records, we've been very, very privileged to be working with of late. Obviously, Lorraine Lewis was on here from Cleopatra Records. Chris Poland of Megadeth will be on here later on in the week. And so many other artists that we've talked with. LA Guns, obviously, has been on Cleopatra Records. So we'll talk about all of that. We'll talk about Melanie and her vast catalog, and certainly who knows whatever else. Now, I know I've got something to present to you, sir, on behalf of one Melanie, but I know you've heard a few of my interviews with her, but I got to do an intro of you because if I don't, especially because, the reason I'm here with you is because of the wrestling world. I've had this big following in wrestling, and I just had on yet another WWE wrestler, so we're not going to get you in the ring, and I certainly don't want to go in the ring. I'm going to try my best to give you that intro, and I'm sure Melanie will be looking from above and hopefully she'll like it, although I don't know if it's quite her range, her style, but we're going to do the best we can. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored about this one. Let's start this show off here and week in style on Sportswire Radio, the number one level radio station where all music and wrestling matters. So with that, wait for it. Further ado here on the Sports Report, the number one cable sports show. He was the manager of one of the greatest female singers of all time and the man that handles press for our favorite record label, Cleopatra Records. His name is simply put, Dave Thompson. My friend, how are we doing?
How do I follow that?
Yeah, it was funny. I just had on a WWE wrestler, guy Raven, and he didn't really want me to do the intro because it was technical difficulties. It was a whole thing. But I had Mark Farner of Grand Funk Rail, which I'll talk about. There's a connection here in a way with Melanie, and he was like all into it. So sometimes I get people. I had Phil Lewis of LA Guns who could have probably lived without it. But, it's my thing, and it's, gotten me the following that I have in the wrestling world. And, I want to, before I talk about Melanie here for a little while, I want to thank you really for your support. Thank you for all you've done, obviously, with the likes of Lorraine Lewis, Scott Gutierrez, who worked on Lorraine's new music, and, Chris Poland of Megadeth. Well, we're supposed to have done it yesterday, but it'll be on later in the week, and everything else you've done. So I want to take the time before we get into Melanie and thank you for your support. Thank you for believing in me. And we're very honored to have met you now on the screen. I know we've been talking on and off for the past several months, but it's certainly a pleasure to meet you here today.
And you, thank you very much. Thank you for all you've done for us. It's been great.
That's been a great relationship, and I hope it continues after this interview.
Oh,
but, yeah, I'm glad to hear that. But, I love what we're going to talk about here today because it takes me back, when I was in college and I took music, and I'm thinking about, for whatever reason, my professor, Lawrence Ross, and we had talked a lot about in my music class toward the end of that semester, Woodstock, the Isle of Wight, and all those different things. And there was somebody that was kind of lost in the shuffle a bit, but now is getting maybe, let's just say, a fresh touch on all the
Yeah.
great things that she has done. And you were her manager and still are. And I'm talking about one Melanie. So set the tables for me, Dave, and what you and Cleopatra Records have been doing when it comes to Melanie's vast catalog.
Ah, I mean, I met Melanie 2021, 22-ish.
Okay.
I was writing a book about the child ballads, which, if you're a folkie, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're
Sure.
not, it was a collection of ballads put together by a man named Professor Child. English folk ballads, 10 volumes of them, 305 different ballads in every permutation he could find. And I decided to write a book about them. I don't know why. But uh, it was going along, and I was thinking, who else was around in the early 60s playing folk music? And I remember reading an interview with Melanie where she said that she started out as a folkie. So I called her up, and it's like, well, I emailed her first, obviously. But she was she was happy to do an interview, didn't know me from Adam. Um, we talked about the child ballads. She had indeed sung. She remembered singing a few. It turns out she recorded 11. Um, but we didn't know there was any tapes of her doing them. So we talked, and then we kept talking, and very slowly, without me actually realizing, I became her manager. Um, and it's like the final straw was really somebody at Cleopatra said, Melanie needs a manager. You should do it. And I was like, you're kidding. No way. I'm a writer. I know nothing about managing artists. I've been writing for 40 years. And he was like, oh, all right then. So I called, talking to Melanie a couple of days later, I said, oh God, so, Cleopatra said I should be your manager. And she said, thank God, I've been waiting for you to ask. And
Wow.
it was like,
Wow.
oh, I
Wow.
think I was kind of trapped. I think, it was a trick, but they got me. One of the things Melanie and I had been doing as we talked was, and this was before we even had a record company interested, was we were going through each of her albums, and if you could do this, package this one up again, what would you do? And we thought of bonus tracks, we thought of the, what the liner notes should
A
say,
live track maybe thrown in, maybe
yeah, or
an acoustic.
outtakes.
Yeah.
She has thousands of outtakes. I mean, walls of tapes of outtakes. Um, so we were going through those, and live shows that she'd love to put out, and it was all going. It was all really fun. But that's all it was. It was just fun. But I kept notes because I thought, well, it'd be fun to make copies of these for myself.
Sure.
And then she signed with Cleopatra. And, Cleopatra were right, you've got this huge catalogue, we're going to reissue it, and Dave's in charge. And I thought, oh, I've never done this before either. But I just went back to all the notes that I'd made when I was talking to Melanie and went through the albums. It's like, right, this is what she wants. And then, of course, she passed away, which nobody expected. Like a
Yeah,
week
I mean, that
after.
was a big thing. Her passing was just a total shock, and I know that nobody even knows, for a time on how and why. It was just a big mystery, just, I mean, what happened and everything.
It's not intentionally a mystery.
We'll leave it at that. Obviously, we'll leave it at
Yeah,
that. But
it was avoidable. Let's put it that way.
well,
She fell, well, she was poorly. She had flu, and then I think that developed into pneumonia. But she was basically getting better, and we're all looking forward to her coming home. And every time I talked to her, she said, I should be out in a couple of days. And the last email, or the last text I ever got from her was, would you and your wife please dress up as Bonnie and Clyde and come and rescue me from this place? And it's like, if we were anywhere near Nashville where she was living,
yep.
we would. And then like 2 days later, she was gone. And it was just like, what the hell happened? And then it turns out things happened, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about some of the things. And first of all, if you're here right now, a couple things. Hit the sub button for me on YouTube for Cleopatra Records. Also, we have the link for the complete collection available now for Melanie, which we'll put that link back up here on the screen. So please support Cleopatra Records and all the artists, and especially Melanie. But, one of the things that I thought was so fascinating about her career and listening to her music was she came from a musical background. She was, I think, like 3 or 4, and she first started singing. Her mom, I think, was in a jazz blues band. I mean,
Yeah.
she basically growing up, and she grew up in Queens until she moved. I think in her, I guess around her teen years, she had moved out of New York City, and I, grew up just a few subway stops away from where she lived. So when she was
Ah,
talking about, yep, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and in the surrounding areas, and I could visualize her in those streets, and I can visualize what she was talking about. Obviously, it was much later, but I could certainly in my head picture the people. I could picture it, and she came from a musical background. I think that
yeah.
was so apparent in her music because she did so many different things. I mean, I even heard her do a Purple Haze version that's out there. I mean, she was that kind of talent. And just talk to me about her catalog that we have out, which is the complete collection, which is available now via Cleopatra. And we might be talking about this in terms of what you have work to do for before, after you and I are off this earth. I mean, I think her vast catalog, it starts from her early beginnings.
Yeah, well, the first thing she ever recorded was a song called "Give Me a Little Kiss" when she was 4, I believe.
Yes,
Yeah,
I had heard that. Yeah, I had heard that.
and they did it as her mum got it recorded as an acetate and sent it in to an NBC talent contest, and she was selected to appear on the show. So the first recording we have is her singing this in sort of a tiny little Melanie voice. And there was a box set came out a couple of years ago now, and it's on there. The final disc is sort of rarities that don't sound as great as they should, but you need to hear them. And that was the final track on there. Um, since then, I found another copy of her singing it much, much later. It was probably in the 2010s, and she was singing it to
Mm,
some fans, and they recorded it. So
sure.
I put that on one of the albums as a bonus track. Um, she started recording professionally in earnest in 1967, did
Yeah.
2 singles for Columbia. Then she signed to Buddha for the next 3 years.
No, she
Then
had her
she's
own label for a bit too, which was,
Yeah,
you think about it at that time, everybody now, has had their own label or they put it out through a distributor, and such. But she, all those decades ago, to me, you think about the days, that was when you had to be on Columbia, you had to be on Capitol, you had to have been on Warner, Elektra, Atlantic. I mean, EMI. You had to be on. If you weren't on any of those labels, it was almost like, how are you going to survive? But yet she was so ahead of her time without even knowing it by having her own label back in the early 70s.
yeah, that was Neighborhood Records. She was, I believe, only the third or fourth artist to do that. The Beach Boys did it first with Brother. Then came the Beatles.
I was going to say the
Then,
Beatles definitely had their own label.
yeah. And then basically it's between Melanie and the Stones as to who was next.
Yeah.
And it came about, I think for the same reason everybody does it. She was with Buddha, who were best known as a bubblegum label. So,
Sure.
you mentioned all those other labels that you should be on, and
Yep.
yeah, she should have been on Elektra or Asylum, one of those, somebody who could actually work her for what she was. Buddha saw her as a very pretty girl, and I use that word deliberately because that's what they did.
Right,
Even
right,
though
right.
she was now 22, but she's still a very pretty girl.
Sure.
She joked once after she'd left the label that she had to keep an eye on them because they were putting out a compilation of unreleased stuff. And she said, I have to come up with a title because otherwise they're going to call it Melanie Cutie Pie. They probably wouldn't, but I mean, that was where the relationship had got to. So she started her own label, which was very far-sighted, as you said, and could have been what she needed, but bad decisions on distributors. Let's put it that way. Um, she didn't really have a strong team behind her. It was basically just her and her husband.
Yep.
And then, they'd hire
Peter, yep.
people. They'd hire people and change. And the label went on for 2 or 3 years, but her live, she was always really, really successful. She could still pretty much sell out Carnegie Hall at the end of the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, even up until the end of her life, she was still out there. The BBC tribute. I mean, she was out there. She was
Yeah,
an amazing performer. And I'm curious. And we're gonna put the links up here once again in another minute or two. For you as her manager, I know this was, I say it loosely because you didn't have experience. You were a writer, but going through this catalog, which is obviously on Cleopatra, we're talking about. I mean, it's her and Jimi Hendrix that are going to wind up having, I mean, the most music out there probably after her passing. But I mean, what is that like for you in the pressure and just, trying to find different things? Because, the Melanie fans are, I mean, they are as
rapid.
devoted as they come. So what's
Yeah.
that like for you now as her manager and also working here at Cleopatra in terms of trying to put together all of this for her vast catalog?
It's a lot more fun than I expected. I mean, think about it. One of your favorite artists, you've got their entire catalog laid out in front of you. Yeah. And someone says, make a record.
Flash, flash, dash. Need to get across town, ignore the loss.
Well, that's the volume. Sorry about that. Yep. We were going to put the link up there for you, but go ahead. We're going to put it up to show what you have out there, but we can't put the volume up, but go ahead. You were saying.
I've never been shouted down by an animated fox before.
That's unfortunate. It's good for business because that means at
Yeah.
Cleopatra you're getting the YouTube ads. But I wanted to put up, some of the stuff there that you have with the catalog and and what
Yeah.
it's kind of fun that you had talked about that it's not it's something you're enjoying, I guess.
Yeah. As I say, I've got this entire catalog in front of me. I've got my notes from talking with Melanie. So a lot of the albums, it's like, okay, she released this album in 1982. Let's find the bonus tracks for it. She suggested this, this, and this. Sometimes she got the date wrong, so it's like, okay, that one can't go on here. It has to go on that one. Yeah, and she was happy to admit she'd recorded so much stuff she didn't have a clue when most of it was. If she hears it, she can remember the studio.
Wow.
She can tell me what the studio looked like. But
Wow.
as to what year it was, she could be hazy. So there was some research to be done, which again I love doing. I mean, a lot of my
Well, you're a writer,
books.
though. That's where you're,
Yeah,
you come into play. I mean, you being a writer, that stuff you can do, but just putting together an album or a remastered version or new stuff out there. I mean, I just would think that would be just such a timely thing to do, and especially like you said, putting together what was from this session, what was from this
yeah,
year, what was there. Do you want to add a bonus thing? Because so many, as we know, so many bands and and artists put out a remastered version or a limited edition or something that's newer to let the fans have something that they could rebuy, or obviously with the way digital is and stuff like that. So that's certainly like I said, challenging, I would still think.
I guess it is. I'm lucky. I've got a really good team behind me at
Absolutely.
Cleopatra. We've got a remastering guy, Jürgen Engler, who used to be in the band Die Krupps. Well, he still is, actually.
Yeah, I heard of him.
He's in Die Krupps, and who are, basically assumed to be an industrial band, but he is phenomenal remasterer. So I send him this really sort of dodgy sounding Melanie recording and say, "Can you do anything with this?" And it'll come back. It's like, it was recorded at Electric Ladyland. It sounds amazing.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, he can do that. So I'm confident enough. Whatever I find, it can be made listenable. A good example was not so long ago this year, we put out the last show of her Japanese tour in 1972, which somebody recorded from the audience with a cassette. And it
Wow.
sounded like it. So I sent the tape to Jurgen and say, "Can you do anything with this?" And it came back and it's like, "Oh my God, this is fantastic." So having that confidence that pretty much whatever I pull out can be fixed. I don't feel the pressure of, oh God, I've got to find another bonus track and they all sound like rubbish. Because I know they won't once they've been remastered. And I guess it helps that a few months into doing this, Cleopatra hired me as their press officer.
Which
So,
we're very thankful that they've done that, because you've
oh,
given
so
us some
I.
opportunities here in this platform. So I will say Cleopatra definitely made a great decision. I mean, it's certainly one of the
Thank
better
you.
decisions they've made recently, and hopefully that they give you a lifetime contract.
That would be nice. But it means that, I say I've got a great team behind me, and I'm part of that team because I do the press releases
Yep.
and I know exactly what needs to go into them. Whereas a lot of times you read a press release and say, well, I'm sure there's more to it than that.
Yeah, I've worked in politics, and I always, with they obligatory. Everybody sends a press release out, and it's like, yeah, I got that, and but what you do is so meaningful. Let me ask you this question, and when I think about Melanie, and one of the things I had mentioned in my intro is, I go back to Woodstock, I go back to Isle of Wight. These are things that she was a part of, and everybody thinks about certainly Joan Baez. I get that, Joni Mitchell. Certainly later on Stevie Nicks, and I even want to throw in the Wilson sisters later on in the 70s. But I really feel like with what Melanie and her voice, she got lost in the shuffle a little bit. Like you said, she was this pretty girl, and she was kind of had this angelic voice. She didn't fit into different things. Yes, she had some hits, but it's really, when you think about how important she was, and I bring up Woodstock because I had on Mark Farner, obviously, of Grand Funk Railroad. We were talking obviously of the importance, the magnitude of Woodstock, Isle of Wight, obviously that goes back to my music class when I was in college, and I think about Professor Ross, and when he was teaching us in that, and when you go back in her career, how important were, when you think about things like Woodstock and Isle of Wight for her?
I mean, very, but it's interesting. We were talking about Woodstock one night, and all of our phone calls were sort of late night for whatever reason. I think she had problems sleeping and thought everybody else did.
My guest a few days ago, Raven, a WWE legend, was same thing. Does not sleep. He has a sleep disorder. There you go.
But we were talking about Woodstock one night, and she said the funny thing was, everybody now calls her the First Lady of Woodstock. And she said that's only true because I went on before Joan Baez and Janis Joplin. It wasn't until the 80s that people started to magnify her Woodstock appearance because, of course, she wasn't in the movie.
Right.
And she wasn't on the first triple album.
Yep.
Because the record company didn't think it matched her image.
Right. Right.
They realized their mistake and allowed some songs onto the second Woodstock album, but of course that did not have the impact. It was a couple of years later. People sort of regarded it as the offshoot, the offcuts that nobody wanted. But she did Woodstock, but she did Isle of Wight, as you said. She did the Glastonbury 1971. And a lot of other festivals. Is interesting when you look at the festivals she played and who else was on the bill. She was very much considered an underground artist, particularly in the UK. Somebody posted on Facebook the other day a flyer from a venue in Manchester that specialized in prog rock and underground. So you had Hawkwind, Pink Fairies, King Crimson, Melanie.
Yes,
And
certainly. Yeah,
Melanie
throw
was
yes
in
in there.
there.
Yep.
And that really summed up the audience she was getting. Unfortunately, Brand New Key, which was her biggest hit by far,
Yeah, absolutely.
gave
Number
her
one.
it gave her a completely different image. She was now the cute girl who sang about bicycles and roller
But
skates.
that wasn't that. The funny thing was that wasn't her. I mean, she could go
No.
out and do folk. She could do with a chorus, a big chorus behind her. She could rock. I mean, that's the
Oh
thing
yeah,
that I kind of felt like she got lost in the shuffle a bit
yeah.
because again, everybody when it comes to Woodstock, I remember Joan Baez, Janis Joplin. My mom sings and she covered "Take a Piece of My Heart." Everybody knows
Mhm.
Janis Joplin. Everybody knows Joni Mitchell. But then there's kind of Melanie, who really, catalog is probably more vast than certainly Janis Joplin's, obviously, but
Yeah,
all
yeah.
of them. And I think about even I just saw the Bob Dylan movie earlier, very early in the year, and you would think, in that they talk about obviously Joan Baez, but they didn't really talk about a Melanie and in the impact of what she brought to the table, and I think that's why I had asked about Woodstock because I know Mark Farner I talked about just the importance of Woodstock, but if you really
Yeah.
think about her performance, I was just curious what she thought of it, and later
Um,
on in her career.
she looked at it as, she was glad she'd done it. She looked on it as a blessing, but it really didn't help her career at the
Not in the way
start.
that those other artists were on that
No,
bill that helped.
because again, they were in the movie.
Yep.
If
Yeah.
she'd been in the movie, it would have made all the difference in the world. But again, as I say, the record company wouldn't
And also,
give permission.
as we're here with the manager of Melanie, and also the man that does a great job representing with our press releases for Cleopatra Records, Mr. Dave Thompson. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. Your voice, figuratively, where all music and wrestling matters here, Sportswire. If you are also out there, hit the sub button for Cleopatra Records on YouTube. Follow them on Instagram. Also, go to the Cleopatra Records Facebook page. Also, Melanie's Facebook page. Please go out there. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe this, but also support our friends at Cleopatra who have definitely helped us out here. So please support Cleopatra Records. We're going to give Melanie something, a post, obviously, mythically, but we'll take care of that in a few minutes. But my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. Again, we're here with Dave Thompson. But, Dave, I think that it makes sense on how she felt about that. But what did she feel about her hit songs? And you talked about Brand New Key. I mean, obviously, look at what they've done to my song, Ma. What did she feel about her hits? Was it a blessing or a curse?
The hits were a blessing, but Brand New Key was very much sort of a poison chalice because it was not your typical Melanie song. I mean,
Right.
she'd done sort of novelty songs in the past, but that one just hit a certain note with the record buying public pretty much all over the world. And if that's the only song by someone that you've heard, well, you know what it's like. You hear a song and think, "Oh gosh, all their records are going to sound like that."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, we
Um,
get artists on here all the time, as you know, and they get typecasted by one
yeah,
song or two songs,
yep,
and and one of the challenges for an artist is they want to be able to diversify. They want to be able to
yes,
why because there is a musician, you want to be able to explore different things. That has been such a topic on here through the past year. I had Doug Pinnick of King's X, and we were talking about the challenge of putting out new music and
hmm
and even a lot of these 80s bands I've had on, Great White, LA Guns, Phil Lewis. I mean, they have been, they put out an album every day. But I mean, like it is tough sometimes. It's almost a blessing and a curse. I always feel like when the artist has that big hit sometimes
yeah,
because you get stereotyped. That's the
that's
word
right.
for me is stereotype.
I mean, her response to it for her next album, she wanted to do a double album with one track that took up the whole of side one.
Rush key Q Rush 2112 basically.
Yeah, or cue any sort of English prog band, like
Okay. Well,
Vandergraaf Generator.
right.
Um, that's what she wanted to do, and it was going to be the first release or the first worldwide release on Neighborhood Records.
Her label. Yeah.
Yeah, her label. And the distributor said, no, you can't do that. Your audience will hate it. You can only do a single album and it's got to have 10 songs on it or whatever.
40 minutes
So,
time wise, right? The certain, we want the 4 minutes. Anything over
yeah,
4 minutes, they don't.
lots of potential hits. So she did that, and that was the Stone Ground Words album. And when we were talking about the reissues, one thing that she was very adamant on, she wanted to recreate that double album. And it's like, okay, where's the sidelong track? Well, we didn't record it. They wouldn't let you. But, we can put on other songs. So we recreated the double album Stone Ground Words. Then she was talking about, because she followed her own direction, which was great artistically, was not so great commercially.
Yeah.
So, the record company would say, well, we want you to put on a pretty frock and sing Barry Manilow songs. And she'd say, no, I'm pregnant, so I'm going to take the next 6 months off.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things that I think Melanie was ahead of her time in, not so much just in having the record label, obviously, yes, artist control, but also she really cared about her family. She took time to raise her kids. I think that that's really something where a lot of artists have a major challenge. I'm in wrestling, and this is a big thing in the wrestling world because you're on the road, kind of like an artist. Here in the music
That's
world,
right.
you have to travel 200-300 days a year and perform. But Melanie took the time when she started, having her family and raising her kids. She put time for that. I think she was ahead of her time in that. You want to talk about that?
Well, you want to talk about the times that she was in. One record company or just somebody at the distributors suggested she get an abortion because you can't take 6 months off because it'll destroy your career. And she was like, well, I think my career will still be there when I come back. And it was. And she had the baby a baby as well. But there was an album she was working on that was scheduled for release like in the new year, right after Layla, her first daughter, was born. She cancelled the album. All the poor record company, they'd all the press people, they'd been splattering. Melanie's new album, Autumn Lady, will be out in January, and suddenly she says, "No, I'm taking 6 months off, and I'm not finishing the album, and we'll just do something else."
Right.
So we also recreated that album, like completing the discography that should have been. And coming up fairly soon, there was a live album that she wanted to put out in 1972. Again, distributors, no, nobody wants another live album from you, young lady. And so we're going to put that out.
Wow. Well, you know what? I'm excited about that. And I want to tell people where they can go out and do that. You can go to CleoRex.com. I actually have it here on my screen where you can buy a lot of Melanie's music. And, Melanie, and let me tell you, what and we see the Made in Japan. We see she's done a lot of stuff, Christmas stuff. She's done, children's stuff. I mean, she has done a lot of things. That's what I love about an artist like Melanie is that she was able to diversify. She didn't want to be stereotyped. She didn't want to be labeled. And I think that that's why we need to support her catalog and support Cleopatra Records. And obviously an amazing career. And I think about Woodstock. We had Mark Farner on here and he talked a lot about the importance of Woodstock for Grand Funk Railroad. But deep down, Melanie was one of those important parts to that historic show, which again was in Woodstock, New York. And I'm in New York. So please support Melanie. Please support Cleopatra Records. We're honored to be here for another 15 or 20 more minutes with Dave Thompson to talk about all the great things Cleopatra has going on. Plus, we're going to give something to Melanie here. So hang on tight for that. And my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, your voice, figuratively and literally, with all music around the place. I wanted to ask you this question. What Melanie thought today about today's music scene and what she thought about the way the record labels operate in this day and age. I'll be curious in what she thought about those things.
She didn't recognize the music scene today. She was aware of who was popular, but it didn't make any difference to her. She always operated in her own little world. It didn't matter what was going on outside. People say, "Oh, you could be the next Linda Ronstadt." I said, "I don't want to be the next Linda Ronstadt. You could be the next whoever. I don't want that. I am going to do this." Because her influences, we talked about her musical family and her mum was a jazz singer. one of Melanie's big influences was Blossom Dearie, who was like a big star on the 50s jazz scene.
I remember
Um,
Blossom Dearie in music class. I remember that was, again, here we go back to Professor Lawrence Ross's
mhm.
class. I mean, we talked about Blossom Dearie in my class when I studied music. Yep.
She also loved Kurt Weill,
Yep.
Three Penny Opera, Lotte
Yep.
Lenya, and those things came out in her music in very unexpected ways. But you can just listen to something and say, somebody's been listening to Three Penny Opera, haven't they? And she said, yes.
So she didn't feel the need then, because again, like you talked about Linda Ronstadt, there's some artists that felt the need to still chase that commercial success.
Mm,
Aerosmith just put out an EP with Youngblood. You think about
yeah,
Dylan, like the Dylan movie. Elton John obviously has done this, countless times. There was certain artists from, McCartney's McCartney, but he's certainly been a part of, think about that era, Madonna later on, but she's, a prime example of that. But she never felt that she needed to chase that success commercially
no,
that maybe her peers were continuing to.
no, she stopped competing, probably early 80s.
Okay.
Um, and just, I mean, she'd never really sort of said, oh, this is popular, I better do it. There was never going to be a punk rock Melanie album. Um, although she did do a disco album in, well, what the
Well, I
fans
mean,
called a
listen,
disco album.
Kiss did disco. I mean,
Yeah, but
everybody did try that. That was maybe
oh
the
yeah,
line, right?
but she waited until 1985.
Well, you were about 6 years too late, but I mean, even I would know that. But I mean, but she wasn't somebody that felt at any point, even later in her life, with the whole, internet, the digital age, that I want to maybe try one more crack at commercial success.
No, I mean, she was still writing songs all the way to the end. In fact, we reissued an album or an EP she did in 2015.
Yes.
And it was called Ragamuffin. And as bonus tracks, we put on a whole bunch of the songs she wrote after that. So there was like another album's worth of pretty much unheard new compositions.
Mm.
And playing through it, it's like, that could have been a hit. One track we pulled off, one thing that Cleopatra are great at is creating new versions of songs by using like an original backing
I
track,
have
original
noticed that.
vocals,
Yes, I have
and
noticed
then
that. Yes.
and then a guest guitarist. So we pulled one of these tracks. It's called Aloha Lucifer, and Cleo were like, "Well, who can we get to do it?" And it's like, I know this band called Charming Disaster. They're not huge, but they're really fun. They're really talented. It's a duo actually. They could do a good job of it. So
Yeah.
we sent them the tape, and they came back with this Aloha Lucifer, which was fabulous. Um, we've done others. I have this dream, and I'm sure that's how it's going to remain. Melanie played the 1971 Glastonbury Festival,
Yes.
which was pretty much the British Woodstock for the underground. Um, so far, we've had Paul Rudolph from the Pink Fairies do a track with her, and Terry Reid, before he passed away, did a great version of Mr. Tambourine Man with her.
Oh,
And
wow.
and I would just love if we could get everybody who played at Glastonbury to do one of these things and then put out a Melanie Glastonbury album.
Wow.
Um, I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's even, like sensible. But yeah, I'd love to hear, you know, Melanie with Gong, Melanie with Hawkwind, Melanie with the Edgar Broughton Band.
Well, you know what? I mean,
Yeah.
that's such a thing. That's such a thing that you see that even after the artist passed away, because obviously, technology and the music scene, you're able to do things so much. I was curious before I present something that I want to give to you. Was there an artist or two that she most enjoyed performing on a bill with, or was there an artist that she really had a fond appreciation for? I know you wrote a book on her as well, which is on the Cleopatra Records
Yeah.
website. But was there any artist that she was fond of, or anybody that she
Um,
particularly? And so she
She
wanted
loved
to conform with.
she loved the Stones. She loved Dylan. And I think both of them up to a certain point. I don't think she was out, first thing in the morning on day of release to buy the new Stones album.
Yeah, well,
But
they still are out there. I mean, they are still.
yeah,
I even heard last week that they want to do even another album. They just put one out
good.
last year, and they
I
want to put
love
another one out.
that.
Yeah, me too. No, look, I mean, they're going out. I love when artists, obviously we had Phil Lewis of LA Guns, and they want to put out another album even. So I mean, there you
Yeah.
go.
I mean, I'm not always a fan of bands that keep going, and it's like you could have stopped a few years ago or a few
Yeah,
decades ago, and they just
right.
churn on and change members, and in the
Well,
end,
it's for the pay, it's for the cash grab, and it's
yeah,
for certain reasons. But I think sonically and as an artist, long as you have something to put out there, I'm not surprised about Dylan because I could see a lot of that. What was her? I'm curious because I mentioned Hendrix earlier, and she had covered Purple Haze, which is out there. What did she think of Hendrix?
she liked him. I mean, she was never really nasty about any artist. She appreciated people's sort of musical accomplishments.
Right.
I mean, there were some people who I'd mention, and she would get quite cross with me for daring to mention them, and I'm not going to say who they were. But another thing that's been fun with these, you mentioned Purple Haze. We got Cactus, who have reformed.
Yes, I that's the one I saw. I was like,
Yeah.
wow. I was like that.
Melanie and Cactus. And when it was first mentioned, it's like, no, that is too silly even for me. But back came the tape, and this is really brilliant.
It was,
You
oh
know,
my
so,
God, it sounded fantastic. And so many people
yeah,
have covered Purple Haze, and it was like she nailed it. That was
yeah.
great.
Well, I mean, the thing with Melanie was she had a voice like a steamroller, and she
Yeah.
didn't always use it. But when she did, there's a great clip on YouTube of her in 1970 singing Lay Down with the Edwin Hawkins singers. And, the Edwin Hawkins singers, like one of the sort of greatest vocal groups ever.
Yep.
Melanie drowned them out. They were doing their backing stuff, and then she comes in for a verse, and it's just like, where did that voice come from? It's just huge. Somebody I know who's in a punk band, TV Smith of the Adverts,
Yeah.
his partner was watching Melanie videos just after she died, and said, it's like she was the original punk. And it's like, I can see that because she was so. If you actually listen to her and forget all the baggage, she was so extreme by musical standards. She would never have fit in with, the James Taylor, Joni Mitchell, sensitive singer-songwriter crowd because
No, and
all.
she was very in interviews. She was kind of her own person, which I really respected a lot about her, and I think that's why she will stand the test of time. And obviously,
Yeah,
Cleopatra's a part of that. I know Pete Townsend has said nice words about her in the past,
yeah,
and I know that obviously you guys have done a great job with her. But I got to give you something on behalf of Melanie because you have been so kind to us here, just giving us this opportunity to talk about just everything she's done and I kind of feel like this is fitting because I really, I did my research, my due diligence on this because I think she should certainly be in this, and I want her to be in this. I want her to be in other things, but now she's in the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame. So I
oh,
wanted,
thank you so
yeah.
much.
We'll give you the physical copy when we're off the air, but yeah, she definitely should be in a Hall of Fame. She should certainly be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm not going to
Yeah,
ask you about that because I went into that with Mark Farner, and he went on into a whole rant, but she should really be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm just going to say it. She should be in it.
one of Melanie's failings, and it wasn't necessarily deliberate. She managed to alienate a lot of very powerful people in the music industry
Well, that's Ted
by.
Nugent's problem. He's not in the
Yeah,
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because things he's obviously said
yeah, she
in the
said,
journalist.
and it's like, magazine we will not name call up and say, yeah, we want to put you on the cover, but you have to wear this outfit, and she'd be like, no, yeah, that's not me. I'll wear my own clothes, and then in that case, we won't do the feature." And she was fine. And people in the music industry from the 70s have very long memories
Yeah.
and are very good at spreading stories.
Well, that that you being a writer, but I think that that's why also a lot, there's certain artists from that era that either didn't get in the Hall of Fame or it took them, so much longer to get in. And I was
Yeah.
just, I do think that she should get
Oh,
more of her due. I wanted to ask you this in such, and I don't know if you had talked about this with her ever, but did she have one or two moments in her career that had stood out most?
um, I think Glastonbury was one that she looked back at very, very fondly. It was, I mean, she said it was her audience. Before she got up on stage, she was at the front of the stage with a bunch of bikers drinking homemade beer. And when it was time for her, you can actually see it in the film. She climbs on the onto the stage from the front, and she said, "I almost fell over." But it was, it was a very hippie, underground English, covered in mud crowd, and she loved it. I mean, that was her audience. But again, Brand New Key came along, and that audience ran away. That was one prize, very happy moment. When she announced in 1972 that she was going to donate all the money from her next tour to UNICEF,
Yeah, she was
which,
very peaceful. She was very peace-minded.
yeah,
She was very big into that. I know.
but doing the UNICEF tour was also sort of a very treasured memory, not only for the tour and for what it did for UNICEF, but for how much it annoyed the people around her. She loved their response. Because everybody's, "You can't do that. It's the end of your career. You're giving away $1 million." And she was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it." And she
Wow.
played Behind the Iron Curtain. She played Japan. Um, Not all of it was fun, but the overall experience and the fact that she'd done it meant a lot to her. Yeah, the Carnegie Hall gigs.
Oh, Carnegie Hall. I mean, I went to school literally right down the block from
Did
Carnegie
you?
Hall. Yeah, I went to school
Yeah.
here in Manhattan. There's a school here, John Jay College, and I literally every day for about 5 years, I passed by Carnegie Hall on my way to school. So that's just, an awesome,
Yeah, I
awesome
mean, she
place.
played there 3 times, and, that was always first, pop performer ever to appear on Broadway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was another thing. I thought before we close out that she did do different things. I mean, we know that the children's stuff. She wrote for Broadway. I mean, she was definitely somebody that I really appreciate what she did in terms of her versatility. She was really
Yeah,
versatile in what she wanted to do.
and, I mean, she's gone now, she doesn't know we've done it, but I think if she was still here, once she'd finished saying, "Oh my god, it's horrible," our next album out on January the 2nd, it's called There Should Have Been a Rainbow. It's titled for the first
Well,
song
my
she
mom's
ever
birthday. There you go. There's a
ah,
birthday gift.
day before mine. Um,
Well, happy birthday. We'll honor you on the
Thank you.
3rd.
It's called There Should Have Been a Rainbow, which was the first song she ever wrote. And like 3 or 4 months after she died, somebody got in touch and said, "My uncle was her drama teacher and recorded her singing at
Wow.
16, 17, 18 years old, and sent me this tape of Melanie at that age doing mainly folk songs, a couple of pop covers. Um, so that's coming out January the 2nd.
Wow.
And for me, it's probably the most important album we've done because everyone thinks she started in 67, 68, and we've got her 4 years earlier. The voice is not quite there, but it's close. The guitar playing she's already playing like completely wrong. That's actually another thing she was very proud of, the number of guitarists who came up and offered to teach her to play properly. And the session men who would say, "Well, yeah, of course this session's going slow. We can't follow your guitar playing. Could you play it properly, please?" Um, I love her guitar. That was what drew me to her, and I'm not even a guitar nut. But it was hearing just this guitar that was completely wrong, but worked.
But they say, you know what?
You've
It's
gone
funny you
quiet.
say that. But in music,
Can't hear
sometimes
you.
okay. Do
Can't
you
hear
hear me?
you.
Do you
Can't
hear
hear
me now?
you.
Do you hear me now? Do you hear me now?
Can't hear you.
Okay, 1 second.
Can't hear you.
Okay. Um,
You've muted yourself.
do you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
Uh, I'm okay. I got it. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? 1 second. Can you hear me now? Because Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay. I'm gonna unplug my audio. Can you hear me now? Well, ladies and gentlemen, technical difficulties do happen. We're going to finish the rest of the interview. You know, obviously, Dave, we've spoke a lot about Melanie. We have a new album coming out on January 2nd, which we're very there we go. There you are. You look good. You look great.
There I am.
But obviously, we've had
Different room.
We've had some technical difficulties, but we have some new music coming out on January 2nd. Is there anything else that you want to talk about or promote when it comes to Melanie here?
Basically just the entire catalog, and there is actually a collector's guide to all the albums available for free on the Cleopatra website.
I have that right in front of me. Yep.
Okay. Download that. That will tell you what you're getting into. And I think it is completely up to date.
Yeah, and we also have a big we have a deluxe edition you guys put out a press release for that we also have up on the screen, and certainly with the holidays, also want to point out on the Cleopatra Records website that if you go with his Black Friday still, you can get a 40% discount up on certain CDs, other stuff. So you certainly have the opportunity still to go out there. This is the perfect gift for anybody in the family, perfect for a music collector, Melanie fan. And I really hope people go out there and join and support what Melanie has done, especially all the work Dave has done. You know, Dave has really been the mastermind behind this project. We want to thank Dave for everything he's done for us here on Sportswire, and you know, especially with her catalog. And it's a large catalog, and you think about just what we're going to see over these next several years. And I want to give a big plug to Brian Pereira, obviously also a Cleopatra. He's been the man that, you know, is signed off on all this stuff, and it takes a lot to get behind this. And certainly we're happy to also induct Melanie into the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame. And we'll give her the physical copy when we're off the air for you to proceed with. And also, I guess then, for those that aren't a Melanie fan, what would you want to take away from tonight's show to maybe give them that opportunity to look into Melanie's catalog with us here at Cleopatra?
Well, you could start with the T-shirt. I'd forgotten I was wearing it.
I see, and I have her page up right now with that. Yep.
You can get that from Cleopatra Records as well. I think. Oh, how would you start? I honestly
I think
don't
you'd
know.
start by just going and diving into a catalog that is so vast and so diversified. You know.
Start with one of the live albums, because you'll recognize some of the songs, I'm sure, from oldies radio, but you'll get a good idea of what else she was capable of.
Absolutely.
I mean, one of the releases that I'm very, very proud of, she wrote what she hoped would become a Broadway musical about Calamity Jane's illegitimate daughter by Wild Bill Hickok, which was a thing. This woman appeared in the 1940s, I think, who claimed that was her background, and I think it's kind of been disproven now. But Melanie wrote a musical which was basically based on the letters that Calamity Jane wrote her daughter, and it was never recorded. It never got to Broadway. And I said to Melanie, "Yeah, I'd love to actually do that." And she was like, Well, you can't because we didn't record anything. So, shut up. Over the next 18 months, I tracked down everything. I found a live recording from one of the read-throughs. I found some demos that they recorded for potential investors. A couple of songs she had done live around that time or recorded around that time. And I was able to piece together the entire stage show. There was a couple of little bits that I couldn't find, so I got her son and daughter to record them.
Wow.
I got them to do some of the dialogue as well.
Wow.
Melanie was doing other dialogue on the tape, and I was so happy with that. It's like probably the only person who was, but who else would care that much? It was just a real thrill to sit there and look at two CDs that Melanie was convinced would never exist. And just to be able to sort of look up and wave at it and go, nah, done it.
Well, I mean, there's a lot out there that we really want to get people to go out and explore. It's CleoRex.com is where you can go find out Melanie's catalog. All you have to do is just type in Melanie for artist. You can also go to the Cleopatra Records Instagram page at Cleopatra Records, also Cleopatra Records YouTube page, also Melanie's Facebook page. Dave is certainly in charge of that. So please go out there and support what this artist has done. What an amazing journey. And her memory is going to live on forever. I think that's, to me, the moral of the story. An artist, and especially her. I know that we talked about her being overlooked, but I think now with Cleopatra and Dave in charge, we're going to certainly get a new fresh coat. And she's got new music out coming up on January 2nd. What a birthday gift for Mom. What a gift for anybody here. So please go out there and support her and Cleopatra. They've been so generous to us here on Sports. I want to thank them for their support with Scott Gutierrez, Lorraine Lewis, certainly Mr. Poland, and Melanie is in the Hall of Fame. My friend, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for everything. And, I hope you come back here and when the album's out and talk about it. We got to talk about the album after January 2nd. Anything else that you have here in the label? We want to talk and promote.
I just thought I should mention the Melanie Christmas album.
Yes, I have it right in front of me. I'm glad that you had mentioned that. I have it right here.
Melanie's Christmas Treasury. It's a collection of the songs that she recorded between like the mid-90s and like 2018 or so. If you love Christmas music, it's great. I mean, she is one of the few people who can take a song that you've heard 1,000 times and make it her own.
Yep.
So, and as I say, it's called Melanie's Christmas Treasury, and there it is.
I have it right here in front of me. I have the vinyl version even. I mean, you get a discount right there. You got her stuff. Yep, she definitely knew how to get into the Christmas spirit, and why not? I mean, everybody else has got Christmas music out, and if you're tired of hearing Mariah Carey's, you can hear Melanie's. So that would be my way to go.
That's Melanie with her jazz singing mum.
Bless her heart.
I think 1968.
Wow, that is so cool. You know what? That is so cool. That is such a cool treasure. And also we have some work there with some of the Stray Cats, which always were a band I loved. And I hope we'll all love this, and you can see it out there, and all her other great work. My friend, thank you for everything. Thank you so much. And I'll see you here in the next month or two. We'll talk about the new album. We'll talk about some other things. And thank you for your support of my platform, honestly.
Loving it.
Thank you. That is Dave Thompson. He is the manager of Melanie. He's also the man behind all the great press and publicity for our dear friends over at Cleopatra Records. Please go out there and support them, especially with Black Friday. Cleopatra Records on YouTube, Instagram, CleoRex.com. Go out and buy some merchandise. Go out and buy some music, and especially Melanie's. And Melanie is in the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame here. Thank you so much, everybody. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, your voice figuratively and literally with all music and wrestling matters. If you're here in Sportswire Radio, we'll be back here later on. And until then, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on the number one global radio, the Sportswire Radio with all music and wrestling matters. Go out there and support Melanie. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day.